Hey guys, Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior. Cryptocurrency is certainly on a tear for the first 6 weeks of 2023. In the last couple weeks, we've seen quite a bit of a downside reversal. Today, I'm going to unveil 3 bearish signs for Bitcoin. So let me start off by saying this. Overall, I love the secular story for cryptocurrencies. The blockchain technology, I think the promise of Bitcoin and Ethereum, particularly the practical application of a lot of those structures and technologies, certainly a long-term bullish story, a long-term encouraging story. But there's a difference between the secular thesis, sort of the overall thing, things like AI and blockchain and electric vehicles, versus the tactical short-term reality of supply and demand, of optimism, of pessimism, of fear and greed. This is where technical analysis can be so valuable to help you disconnect from a technology, a theme, an idea that could and arguably should work over the long term versus the realities of the market sort of over and underestimating where things really are at any given moment. Having said that, we're going to look at the chart of Bitcoin, talk about 3 bearish developments that have really taken hold here in the last week or so. Before we get to the chart, by the way, if you like this thinking about investor decision-making, behavioral finance, and technical analysis, won't you subscribe to my channel? Also, give the video a like if you appreciate it. We'd very much appreciate that back. Put a comment below. What is your target for Bitcoin over the next 4 to 6 weeks? Let me know in the comments. Looking at the chart here, we can see the trajectory of Bitcoin. We're going back to the fourth quarter of 2021, just to get the movement out of the all-time high, sort of in the upper 60,000s. You can see the sort of stepwise move to the downside. One of the key, I think, ways to illustrate the downtrend phase of 2022 is these increasing trend lines, right? So you make a new low, we have an upward sloping trend line, and then that breaks. We saw that in the December of 2021. First quarter of 2022, same thing. Higher lows after a new 52-week low or new swing low. We make a higher low, we draw a trend line, we break it. That was the next leg down. New low, higher low, we break the trend line. New low, higher low, trend line. You see how this has happened so many times. Look at how that changed finally in January of 2023. Once again, we made a new low, in this case a new 52-week low. We made a higher low there at the end of December, and then we didn't touch the trend line. We actually broke out, and instead of breaking that trend line to the downside, which is what had happened all of these other times during the bearish phase, the market actually accelerated to the upside. Bitcoin actually rallied from around 17,000 there in early January to the upper low 20s certainly, and eventually to the mid 20s here by mid to late February. So something changed, what we call a change of character. Now, how else can you define that change of character? Well, I would say a couple things. Number one, you can look at where we're at relative to moving averages. So we broke below the 200-day moving average really for good back here in January or December of 21, January of 2022, broke below the 200-day, retested it from below in March, remain below it that whole rest of the year. Finally, in mid-January, we break above the 200-day moving average. I think that's important. Also, look at the bottom of the chart and look at the momentum characteristics. The momentum was in the bearish phase, and what that means is the entire range of the RSI moved down, right? And in a bearish phase, when a trend is down, even though you'll have short-term upswings and downswings, the entire momentum range pushes down a little bit. So you can see on down moves, the RSI often became oversold. On up moves, the RSI rarely got above 60, which is the upper end of this red shaded area. Look at how that changed in January of this year. Instead of stalling out around 60, the RSI went well above that, actually almost reaching 90 in mid-January. So it certainly showed signs of a broad acceleration to the upside here in January. So the picture looks really bullish in January into mid-February. What's changed here in the last week? Well, let's look at those metrics that we talked about on the way down, see about what's happened here recently. And I mentioned the 3 things to look for. Number one, a bearish momentum divergence. And what that means is when you see the price going higher, and you see the momentum actually sloping downwards. So again, the price making higher highs January into February. Look at how we became extremely overbought in mid-January on that peak. But on the second peak in mid-February, we actually didn't even reach the overbought condition. So that pattern where you have higher highs in price, lower peaks in momentum is called a bearish momentum divergence. That often indicates an exhaustion of buyers. Basically, there's not enough momentum to keep this upward pressure going, and usually that is a leading indicator often of a topping pattern. So that's sort of your early warning system. Second thing I would tell you, and this is actually happening today, we're recording this on Thursday, March 9th, we broke below what I would consider a key measure of support. Look at the peak here in November. This is after we made a new, really tested the low here in September, rotated higher and peaked right around this level. It's just around 21,000. We then rotated down to make the new lows in November. We retested that. You can see for about a week. We pulled back and then broke above that level. We then pulled back and tested that level from above in mid-February. So when we made a new high, that's actually a real classic bullish technical pattern where you have a resistance level, you break through it, you retest it from above, and that resistance level becomes support. That's sort of where we're at right now. So when Bitcoin is coming back down to that same level of support, it's pretty reasonable to expect the price to stall out there. But for now, it actually is not holding. Bitcoin has gone below 21,000, taking it below the February low. So instead of that level of support holding, as it did in February, it's no longer holding. Now, again, it's still early days here. We'll see if we get a follow-through, which means you break through support and actually follow through to the downside. But for now, that support level very much in question. That's the second point. The third point, we've had a downside follow through in momentum. So in a bullish phase, the entire range of the RSI usually moves higher and you become overbought on rallies like we did in January. And when you pull back, the RSI remains above 40, which it did in mid-February. That has now changed, and over the last week, the RSI has broken well below 40, very near to the oversold conditions. So while we're not yet oversold, while we're just breaking support, overall, the momentum picture is telling me we're more in a bearish phase than a bullish phase. So in the last week, all three of those things have come to pass. And really, the first signal happened a couple weeks ago, which was that bearish momentum divergence in mid-February. The second thing was failing to hold support and breaking below that 21,000 level. The third thing is the RSI moving back down into the bearish phase, which is where it was for most of 2022. Now, what could happen? Next thing to think about, I would argue, would be two key levels. The 20,000 level, which is a big round number, and Bitcoin, if you look back in the history of Bitcoin, there's a reason why I have dotted lines at each of those 10,000 points, because those levels have often become very important pivot points for the price of Bitcoin. I think that's one level to watch. The 200-day moving average is just below that, around 19,700. So I think we're right nearing that potential area of support. Reasonable to expect Bitcoin to find at least some sort of floor around that level. If that holds, that could set us up for the next move higher. I would look for the momentum characteristics to validate that, by the way. But if we fail to hold that 200-day moving average, that could tell us to expect a return back to the lows from 2022. What do you think about Bitcoin? What's your target over the next 4 to 6 weeks? Let me know in the comments below. Also, before you leave, make sure you subscribe to my channel. It'd be great to have you along the ride, and give the video a like. We'd very much appreciate that back. For Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Be well, be safe. We'll see you again soon.